Future Ancestors Services Organization. The practice of anti-racism, anti-colonialism, and decoloniality that I chose for this project is the creation of an organization. Future Ancestors is an indigenous and Black-owned youth-led professional services social enterprise that advances climate justice and systematic barrier removal through the lenses of restorative anti-racism and ancestral accountability. Why is Future Ancestors important? What makes it unique? As I mentioned, Future Ancestors is an indigenous and Black-owned youth-led professional services social enterprise. They support clients via training, researching, speaking, consulting, and influencing services, and they support community directly via donations, skill-building opportunities, and constellation programs. They seek to serve Black, Indigenous, racialized, LGBTQ+, and disabled communities. Their primary sources of accountability lies in their interest and in serving them. They want to support their clients by creating communities, by creating better spaces and relationships that honor diverse people and how this is related to the sense of servitude to these communities. These identities are intersectional. Intersectionality is a term coined in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw and describes how systems of oppression overlap to create distinct experiences for people with multiple identity categories. This concept highlights a way oppressive institutions such as racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, xenophobia, and classism are interconnected. It's a youth-led enterprise. They support their clients, partners, and the communities in understanding the value that anyone of any age brings. According to the United Nations, youth-led enterprises promote underlying competence and intrinsic motivations of youth by creating physical, social, and creative spaces where youth can explore and try business skills, build personal and collective capacities, gain confidence, and develop strong ties with community, government, and private institutions. It's a trilingual organization. They continually build their capacity in English, French, and Michif Cree, and also working in indigenous language revitalization through external and internal documentation. They center decolonized and indigenized ways of being and doing business. How can we create different kinds of workspaces? How can we honor relationships to our ancestors or our community? And they care about those relationships. This informs the way they do business. They've achieved to collect 46K in donations mobilized for community initiatives. It is led by 9 youth contractors. 150K people have freed directly through their services, and 307 diverse clients served, supported, and partnered with them.
Acknowledge that we are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, including the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Now, as Maurice Scott reminded us leading change delegates yesterday at our forum, we are on unceded territory. So what does that mean? That means that a treaty was never signed giving away the land on which we stand. So that means that it was forcibly and illegally taken from these nations. And that's very important to keep in mind. And this is a timely reminder, especially in the context of energy and land development, especially in the context of the Wet'suwet'en Indigenous Youth Blockade, of the RCMP raids on their trading and supply posts. It's a great reminder from the youth-led stand-ins and rallies happening in every single Canadian city across the nation right now. It's a great reminder that the history of forcibly and violently removing Indigenous peoples from their land is a history that we are a part of right now. A reality that we take part in every day through our action and inaction. And the idea of action and inaction. When we think about that in the context of Globe, in the context of the next couple days, we really want to reflect on what does that look like here in this space. We want to reflect on how our action and inaction is going to be dependent on the people we connect with here this week, on the topics that we speak to and the topics that we challenge, and on the questions that we ask, the hard questions. And the hard questions are actually how I ended up today, like on this stage. I first met Globe at an event in 2018. And I was invited as a speaker and as an advisor. I had a great mentor who had some connections. And I was brought in, and I was questioned at the front desk, at the registration desk. I was like, are you in the right place? I'm like, yeah, I'm a speaker and an advisor, actually. And I stood around a little bit, and no one else was asked that. And then I went into a ballroom very similar to this, and I did not see a single other Black presenting person. And I only actively found one other self-identifying Indigenous person. And I felt alienated. I cried in the bathroom. I was frustrated that I wasn't seeing the traditional knowledge and the peoples that I care about, that I come from, represented on this stage that was shaping international policy. And I was upset about this. And I gathered myself. And at a youth roundtable, I was able to question this lack of diversity. I was able to bring up this issue in front of a very esteemed guest, and in front of Mike, Tansy, Claire, the amazing Globe team. And I did so with the recognition that I was forgoing any opportunity to ever work with Globe again. I recognize that in doing this, I may piss people off. And to my utter surprise, Claire, Tansy, and Mike followed up with me after this event. They followed up, they brought me to Globe Capital, I did Leading Change, and then I sat down with the team and we talked about how can Globe be a real leader in the industry when it comes to collaborating with diverse peoples. And that's how I ended up here. And I think that I'm sharing this because it really demonstrated to me the opportunities to learn, to connect, to grow, and to advocate when we ask the hard questions. And I want to make it abundantly clear that Globe is the space to do this. That Globe is the space to ask the hard questions and to challenge those that need to be challenged. It can be scary, you may lose opportunities, you may ruffle a potential client's feathers, you may be blacklisted from a decision maker's office. But what are the consequences of not speaking up?
Now I'm going to introduce some key concepts that are important for this organization. Environmental racism. Environmental racism refers to how minority groups populated primarily by people of color and members of low economic backgrounds are affected by the environment. They are burdened with disproportionate numbers of hazards, including toxic waste facilities, garbage dumps, and other sources of environmental pollution, and others that lower their quality of life. Indigenous people all around the world have experienced the devastating consequences of colonization, in particular assimilation policies, the prohibition of their cultural practices, as well as the degradation of their traditional territories. Indigenous people have been disproportionately affected by climate change and environmental hazards. Afrofuturism. Afrofuturism is an artistic, cultural, and aesthetic current that combines elements of science fiction, historical fiction, fantasy, and magical realism with non-Western cosmologies, thus claiming African identity. Olivia Butler and her Afrofuturism reveals the darkest and most murky side of our hypothetical future, while asserting class, race, and gender. Butler acknowledges that the future is uncertain and that the only thing to do is speculate on what will happen to Black people in it. However, she is pessimistic because there are still many racist practices today and our capitalist system is still colonizing. We are creating the future, but we can see it clearly. We can only try to make it better. Afrofuturism looks beyond the horizon to think about how to transcend the varying past on the present. Pessimistic futurism is thus a critical orientation that does not abandon the historical term of Black existence, especially slavery, but also does not give into that history as a fatalistic limit on what comes next. Instead, it mobilizes historic markers of blackness to unsettle and destabilize the arrangements of power in the present and to try to think beyond those arrangements to remake the future. Climate justice. According to McKenzie, climate justice refers to finding solutions to the climate crisis that not only reduce emissions or protect our natural world, but that do so in a way which creates a fairer, more just, and more equal world in the process. The climate justice movement is said to have begun by critiquing the carbon-driven economy as an indicator of larger inequalities exploited by global capitalism. The climate justice movement focuses on climate change disproportionately impacting marginalized groups and the world's poorest countries. The Paris Agreement was finally adopted on December 2015, which was a historic turning point for global climate action, as it was a point when world leaders came to a consensus on an accord comprised of commitments by 129 nations to combat climate change and adapt to its impacts. Decolonizing business. According to Baptiste and Turner, decolonizing indigenous entrepreneurship and hybrid venture creation involves identifying and overcoming colonial mindsets in indigenous and non-indigenous peoples, developing awareness and a strong critique of Eurocentric colonial bias and its racialized negative discourses and values, asserting and defending the integrity of indigenous rights in global, legal, political education and business practices, examining and critiquing international and national laws, policies and legacies that constrain the rights of indigenous people, dispossess them of their traditional lands and restricted access to their resources, and through addressing intergenerational trauma, assimilation and loss of culture and languages. Decolonization also involves recognizing that indigenous people are guided towards hybrid venture creation by communities, associated values, traditions, culture and worldview, particular development strategies, socioeconomic needs and objectives, and orientation towards the use of economic development and entrepreneurial ventures, opting in or opting out as mechanisms for asserting inherent rights, sovereignty, self-determination, and self-governance. Why does it inspire me? Future Ancestors inspires me and guides me because it incorporates the fight against racism and discrimination into your academic work. It helps people to interrogate their identity and question its impact on other people's worldview. It gets into the origins of racism, what whiteness means, and how it is originated in present-day academia. It also inspires me because it was founded by a strong woman, Larissa Crawford. Larissa Crawford is a Métis Jamaican, a published indigenous and anti-racism researcher and policy advisor with over 13 years of experience. Larissa is the founder of Future Ancestors Services. Since the launch of Future Ancestors Services in April 20, the organization has mobilized hundreds of dollars in donations and gifted services for anti-racist and climate justice initiatives. Larissa and her team seek to increase their clients' capacity to honor people and planet through their minds, work, and spaces, and do so while leveraging decolonized and indigenized approaches to doing business. What does it mean to you to act as a future ancestor? We are all future ancestors, and we all play a part in shaping the future the next generations will inherit. To be a future ancestor means seeking to connect with our ancestors and to understand the consequences of their actions and inactions. It also means actively allowing this insight to inform people's personal actions, with the understanding that our actions and inactions will have consequences on our future generations. The limits of the practice are that the organization only works and provides support to people in Canada. Around the world, there are various minority groups that are racialized, and having the support of an organization like Future Ancestors could help them a lot. Future Ancestors might look forward to expanding internationally in the future. People do not know their ancestry. According to Ancestry.ca, almost a third, 32% of Canadians admit that they don't know when their first member of their family immigrated to Canada. There's an additional quarter, 24%, saying they don't know where their ancestors emigrated from. Even if they know their ancestry, people might not be connected to it. Trying to work with your ancestors when you don't know the first thing about them feels kind of like walking into a giant of room strangers. The strengths of the practice are that the organization provides a wide variety of services, such as training services with build capacity and skills that can contribute to holistic sustainable change. Speaking services are action-oriented, comprehensive, and engaging, and also research services. It works with a wide variety of clients, such as Global Affairs Canada, Government of Ontario and Alberta, Environment and Climate Change Canada, or Fisheries and Oceans Canada. They also educate people through social media. The organizations seek to leverage the power of social media with purpose and with content of quality and focus that communities trust to deliver. They do social media with a purpose by creating and sharing resources that can truly inspire and tangibly further learning journeys. These are the references that I used, and thank you so much. You can learn more about Future Ancestors in www.futurancestors.com.